Welcome to Initiating Staff Services on a Disaster Relief Operation Basics. When a disaster occurs in your community, you will need to quickly develop a structure to support responding workers, and the staff services leads for the region are the ones responsible for establishing that structure. The purpose of this training is to provide regional disaster workforce engagement leadership and regional staff services leadership with information on initiating the staff services group on a disaster relief operation. We will be looking at the staff services tasks needed to ensure that all responders are properly assigned and tracked throughout a disaster operation, including their work and lodging locations and their out processing. Providing great customer service is a priority of staff services, and you will hear about it often in all staff services training. Remember, all disaster volunteers and employees are our clients. Our role is to provide the highest level of customer service to our clients to ensure a satisfying and rewarding experience. Our focus should be treating each other with respect and kindness at all times. And our goal is that based on their positive experience, volunteers and employees will continue to support the Red Cross mission. Customer service begins with any type of interaction between staff services and a worker. This could be in person when a worker is physically with staff services, or with any other contact from staff services to the worker. Remember, anytime we call or contact a worker, it is implied customer service. One other practice for staff services is using what we call anticipatory customer service. Anticipatory customer service is being one or more steps ahead of the customer's needs. Anticipating customers' needs is like a game of chess. The best players don't just think of the very next move they must make, they visualize what the next few moves are going to be by anticipating how their opponent will react to each move. Similarly, you should always try to be at least one or two moves ahead of your clients, anticipating what they might want or need. Anticipatory customer service creates a friendly environment for everyone. Anticipatory customer service is more than action, it provides satisfaction. Now that we have indicated the importance of customer service to you, let's look at some of the initial regional disaster workforce engagement team roles in staff services. The Regional Disaster Workforce Engagement Team, DWE, will be on the front lines when a disaster occurs in the community. It can be very hectic at the beginning of the event, and regional leadership will advise DWE of their immediate needs. The DWE team will be recruiting and calling available local volunteers to fill identified needs which may be scaling up rather quickly. It will be important to recruit leadership, especially for those responsible for key activities like sheltering, feeding, public affairs, emergency operations centers, and disaster assessment. Through it all, it is the role of the DWE team to initially track all of the responders and their work locations. Eventually, all of this information will need to be entered into Volunteer Connection. Before we move on, don't forget that workers will have to complete a pre-assignment health questionnaire. We always want to make sure we are deploying a healthy workforce. Next, we will look at some other teams who support initiating staff services when a disaster operation is ramping up. The Disaster Staffing Team provides technical support to staff services leadership on the disaster sites to solve high-level issues during a disaster operation and is comprised of national headquarters level volunteers and employees. The Response Mobilization Support Team, or RMS, recruits and deploys responders to a disaster location, including making their travel arrangements. They also process staff requests that come from the disaster operation and manage the DOOR, a system that displays open staff positions. In addition, they maintain the Disaster Responder Information System, or DRIS, which provides messaging to workers en route to a disaster location. The best way to remember the difference between RMS and disaster staffing is that RMS is responsible for getting responders to the disaster operation, and disaster staffing supports staff services during the DRO. As you know, staff services is the group that supports workers when they are on a disaster operation. The group is led by a staff services lead or chief, depending on the size of the disaster operation. Here is a list of the activities in staff services along with their associated responsibilities. At the beginning of an operation, one worker from the region may be serving in multiple activities. The responsibilities listed above are not all staff services does. And note, as the disaster operation grows, staff services may add a lodging lead and ambassador program lead to the list above. Here is the table of organization for staff services on a DRO. The chief or lead manages the activity leads. On some larger operations that have district locations, there will be a staff services lead at each of the district offices. That staff services lead will report to the district logistics lead, but will still maintain a technical line of support with the lead or chief at the disaster operation headquarters. Now we're going to get started on the tasks you will have to complete to initiate staff services on a disaster operation. As we learned earlier, the regional DWE team will be recruiting and calling available volunteers, recruit leadership for key activities, and initially track all of the responders and their work locations. The disaster event is growing. Once a DR number is assigned to your disaster operation, the DWE team transitions to the staff services group and activities. Not everyone from your original team will be assigned to the DRO, but those with a staff services gap should be assigned and checked in as soon as possible. Now, we're going to discuss how we transition from a regional response to a larger disaster relief operation. We always say, staff your staff services unit first. Let's look at those steps. First, determine what and how many workers will be needed for a successful completion of the staff services tasks. You will have to consider the size and scope of the operation when making those decisions. Work with staff services activity leads in determining their staffing needs and in completing and submitting staff requests. Reference the Staff Services Standards and Procedures document on the Exchange that can provide you with information on staffing needs. You will have to complete staff request forms. Remember to source your staff from local affiliated volunteers, event-based volunteers, partners that your region may have pre-disaster relationships with, and then responders from non-impacted regions. RMS will assist you with this recruiting. The staff services requests are entered into Volunteer Connection by a worker in the local community volunteer activity after the appropriate approval process. Check what approval process is in place at the time requests are made. As the disaster grows, the process may change. Proximity recruiting within the impacted area will occur first. Once the region is unable to fill requests, RMS will increase the geographic recruiting area as needed. As an ongoing task, check that only positions that are needed remain on the door. Check with activity leads to confirm that all open requests are needed. Review open requests daily and remove positions no longer needed by emailing disasterstaffingcenter@redcross.org. There will still be more to do to initiate staff services. Let's look at that now. Right from the very beginning, you have been receiving staff and helping them get to work. But now, you need to start formally tracking the workers and prepare to develop the staff services reports. There will be information to gather, and you can assign the gathering and entering tasks to your staff services team. Most of the tasks can be completed by the staff planning and support activity, with additional support from the local community volunteer activity. Once a DR is established, you will start entering information into Volunteer Connection. Here are some of the items you will complete. Once in Volunteer Connection, enter all of the reporting locations, work locations, a home of record location for lodging, and any other lodging locations. Once your locations are entered, you can begin assigning and checking in all of the responders who have been working on the operation, including your leadership team. You must know their T&M status before checking them in. Be sure to include the workers' assigned gaps and work locations for accurate data entry. Add mission card information to T&M staff profiles in order to track usage data. You will need to back into any commercial lodging that was used before the DR was established, so the costs get assigned to the disaster operation and not to the worker's mission card. Steps for doing this are in the Lodging Job tool. Visiting staff will begin to arrive. Handling the visiting staff is the responsibility of the staff planning and support activity. Here are some tasks to complete. Activate the Disaster Responder Information System, or DRIS. The DRIS is the automated message that responders receive with reporting instructions. The message is updated twice daily or based on the changing needs of the operation. The message states where and when workers will report to and include an after-hours lodging location and contact numbers. In process the visiting staff members. Be sure to indicate that the worker is classified as an MDA worker. MDA workers are given a maximum daily allowance and will be staying away from their home of record while assigned to the disaster operation. It is important to get the MDA assignment correct. The staffing financial commitments in the 5266 are only triggered by MDA responders at the time of their check-in. At check-in, that MDA status charges the DR for airfare, mission cards, and lodging. A mission card should have been given to the worker before deploying to the disaster operation. If the worker arrives without a mission card, you will need to see what plan is in place to provide cards. An employee on MDA must use a travel card instead of a mission card. We will look at more information for visiting staff on the next screen. Here is some additional information for visiting staff. Confirm the worker's assignment and work location. Inform the worker that the work assignment cannot be changed by the worker without the permission of staff services and the lead of the activity they were assigned when recruited. Be sure the MDA worker has lodging. Ideally, workers will be assigned a hotel room. Inform the worker that lodging assignments cannot be changed by the worker without the permission of staff services. On many occasions, local commercial lodging is not available and the worker may be assigned to a staff shelter. More on lodging will be addressed in the following screens. If the worker arrives in a rental car, the car must be registered with Logistics Transportation. Send workers to an orientation. This should be organized and scheduled by the training activity. If the training activity has not been established, provide the visiting worker with local information such as restaurants, places of worship, laundromats, etc. Lodging will have to be obtained for visiting staff. There is a short online course, Commercial Lodging and Overview, and a job tool that lodging leads should view. Some highlights about lodging are covered in this training. Depending on the size and scope of the operation, a dedicated lead or team may be needed to support lodging. The lodging lead will contact Corporate Lodging Consultants, CLC, to request lodging using the lodging request form. Ideally, lodging should be near the work sites. The worker responsible for lodging should notify disasterlodging@redcross.org to receive all reports and confirmations from CLC. Submit lodging requests early in the day after reviewing the arrival report and air travel roster. Track all lodging. All lodging locations, including staff shelters, must be affiliated with the DRO. Use the Hotel Boxes job tool available on the exchange to track all lodging. Back into any hotels occupied prior to the DR number being issued. Follow the instructions on the Lodging job tool. The Commercial Lodging Daily Report, CLDR, should be completed each morning using CLC Cumulative Report. As soon as it is determined commercial lodging is not available, plan for a staff shelter. Notify logistics and mass care that a staff shelter may be needed. Guidance for staff shelters is located on the exchange. Next, let's look at the reports that must be completed. The staff planning and support activity will need to run and distribute reports to operational leadership and to others who may ask for reports. These reports will be run in Volunteer Connection Disaster Management. Use the Staff Services Reports job tool located on the exchange for information on sorting these reports. These should be sent to leadership and staff services activity leads twice each day. Use the IAP for contact information. As the operation grows to a level 3 or above, a remote team will manage the reporting process and distribution and send the reports to the staff services leadership and the assistant director of logistics. Staff Services has statistical information that must be entered into the Disaster Operation Control Form 5266. The data that Staff Services workers enter into Volunteer Connection Disaster Management will generate most of the statistical information that is required for the Staff Services 5266. The Staff Services 5266 will be run as a report in Volunteer Connection Disaster Management in the Incident Listing Run Report tab. You will need to check that the report was updated for the current day's data. This is what you will need to do with the report. First, you will need to copy and paste the Staff Services 5266 Section 5 data into a Word document. Because there were additions and changes made to the Doc 5266, the line numbers in Section 5 do not match up. There is a worksheet available to make this task easier. Please reach out to disaster.staffing@redcross.org to request a copy of the worksheet. Manual entries for staff shelters open, number of training sessions, and number of trained workers are added. In addition, the local community volunteer lead should supply the staffing lead with daily EBV data to be included in the Staff Services 5266. Finally, the Word document with all of the data entered will be sent to the Financial and Statistical Information lead on the operation, who will enter the data into the Master 5266 for the entire disaster operation. With coaching and practice, reporting tasks will become routine and easy to complete. You should be reconciling your reports on a regular basis. Reconciliation can allow you to check your work and identify problem areas. Sort the arrival roster by date and look for responders that should have checked in prior to this day. They may have arrived and did not check in, or they were stopped or lost. You need to find out their status. The Lodging by Worker report is one of the most important reports you have. This report shows you where workers are staying and if entries are missing. All MDA workers should have a lodging location. If not, this is a problem that needs to be resolved. If someone is at their home of record and on MDA, that is a problem. This will very quickly help to identify issues that need attention. At any time, a list of mission cards issued on the DRO can be run. Use the report to compare it to the staff roster report. We've covered a lot of information in this training. Let's look at some final information. Remember that earlier in the course we talked about anticipatory customer service? After many weeks of exhaustive work on a disaster operation, workers are ready to go home. Staff services leads need to plan ahead for staff out processing so that the process is simple and efficient. Your plan for out processing should be shared with all of your team and other workers on the operation and should identify out processing locations for all staff. In your plan, set up a way to remind workers to ask their supervisor for an evaluation a day or two prior to leaving. Staff Services collects copies of these at out processing for the virtual evaluation team. Also, remind them to bring their receipts for expenses over $35 and to check with transportation about what to do with their rental car. Be sure to review the out processing job tool that is available on the exchange. There are two travel deviation forms that you should be familiar with. The Special Travel on a Disaster Operation Form, or STDO, is for workers who have been on operations a long time but want to go home for a few days and then return to the same operation. The second is the Travel Exception Form. This form is used if the worker is staying in the affected area after their assignment is completed or if they want to travel to a different location other than their home of record. Job director approval is required for both situations, and the forms are located on the exchange. In addition to this training, there is a checklist for initiating staff services on a DRO job aid on the exchange. Be sure to download this job aid at the time you will need it to ensure that you have the latest version. There will always be support available to you. Do not hesitate to ask for assistance. Remote support is always available to staff services staff in several forms. It could be someone to assist in running reports, answer technical questions, or even someone to coach. A remote worker can always be assigned to assist with lodging if needed. Email disaster.staffing@redcross.org and request assistance at any time. If after hours, it is best to call the 24/7 number on this screen. This concludes this training. Thank you for stepping up to be a staff services leader. Your role will ensure that workers will have the best customer service and support needed to be successful. You may now exit this course.